Good afternoon, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to another exciting episode of Blether, Thegither, your weekly breakdown of news and politics in Scotland and around the world. And we're having a wee bit of a special episode today where we're going to talk a little bit about the council elections, which, as we all know, are ongoing right now. Actually,
have you been to vote yet?
Have you been to vote yet?
Question.
That's what we want to hear. Have you been to vote yet? Let us know in the comments down below. And everything else as well. Anything you want to talk about, anything you want to comment on what we're saying, please do leave us a wee comment. We do read everything, including this message immediately from Stephanie McWilliams, who's the first one in. Getting to vote and watch a new episode of Blether Together. Good day. We're glad you're having a good day.
Nice one.
And we're happy you're watching us as well. Also, as always, please do give us a wee share around if you can as well. So my name is Stephen Payton, I'm representing the National today, and joining me in the studio is Angela Haggerty, our regular from Common Space. So I thought we'd kick off today's show by discussing what is clearly the big kind of ticket item in the news today, the kind of thing that is going to have a very genuine impact on Scotland moving forward. And that is, of course, Prince Philip retiring at the age of 95, because that is such an important story that all news relating to the council elections which are going on have been pushed right on the BBC's website.
When I got up this morning, it was pretty obvious that half of the world had been up half of the night waiting for this news and the mysterious meeting at Buckingham Palace, and you're going, wow, what a disappointment that like must have been.
Well, it depends what you were hoping for the news to be, which actually...
Well, I mean, a retirement is a bit of an anticlimax, really, isn't it, when you think there's going to be big news, when you're coming on the back of Brexit, Trump, big news is to keep getting bigger and bigger. Prince Philip's just going to stay at home a bit more.
Poke around the house a little bit more. And it was so weird as well, because it was like 3 a.m, 3 in the morning, it was like an emergency meeting for this big announcement, and you're like, oh, someone's dead, surely.
Yeah.
It's just like, nah, Prince Philip's just going to stop being racist in public as much. Like, I don't know, it seems like a bit of a weird overreaction, or big setup for very little.
Top story on the BBC website.
It is a top story on the BBC News website.
Really amazing.
Like, we've got the council elections going on, and that's like the number one thing. And then it's like that surfer who got found in the ocean. And then beneath that, you've got your local council elections.
The thing is, though, broadcasters are really heavily regulated by Ofcom when it comes to talking about elections in general when they're ongoing on the day of the election. It doesn't really apply to digital in the same way, I don't think, because that's not broadcast. But I think maybe the BBC just sort of doesn't really do very much around elections on the day of them. But still, I mean, really, come on. Prince Philip, top story. I mean, even if you're a royalist, this is hardly like,
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
news.
I've seen the royalists get pretty excited today.
UKIP
were out, just kind of like, oh, we love you, Prince Philip. Thanks for all your service.
I think that this is one of those occasions where, regardless of all of the debates that you can have about the BBC, there is no way that you can portray this as being objective reporting on the hard-hitting issues of the day. Come on, we just had Theresa May yesterday accusing 27 other countries of interfering in a general election.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, accusing 27 other countries of interfering in a general election, and then referring to Scottish separatists as being sort of on par with extremist terrorists. It's bizarre. It's like, the EU's against us, and also about half of Scotland are all terrorists. I don't really know what she's actually doing right now. It's but actually, let's come back to that in a little bit and stick with the council elections.
Well, have you been to vote yet, Steve?
I have been to vote. Have you?
I have. Yep.
And have
it
you?
Felt good. Felt good.
It felt good. Yeah,
I always enjoy going out to vote. Did you not feel a little bit of a thrill when you went in? This is you making your mark, making your choice, playing your part in your democracy. I think that, especially as a woman as well, knowing that what other women went through, so that I could go and do that. Feel a real kind of sense of honour almost, being able to walk into the polling station. Yeah,
and I think some of the things that's going to be quite interesting from today is looking at voter turnout, because council elections are historically low turnout, like the 30% sort of period, and with everything that's been on in Scotland, I'm really curious if we're going to see a big bump.
I'm less optimistic.
I didn't say I think it was going to happen. I'm just curious to see what's going to happen.
I think that the local elections have really, really struggled to get a profile after the general election being called. to the point where it was, you have to sort of remind yourself this week a couple of times that, it's the elections on Thursday, isn't it? It's definitely slipped off people's radar as a result, I think, of just the big things, the big news that's been dominating the agendas, like Prince Philip retiring.
Which, of course, never forget.
And also, it strikes me that regardless of the democratic explosion that we've seen in Scotland, we have seen that, and it's been great, it's been amazing. When it's all around a national question, it's all around sort of one thing, a set of issues, I feel like, it becomes a little bit easier to educate yourself in this kind of much more framed thing. When it comes to elections, though, I think people find it a lot more confusing when it comes to knowing exactly what it is that they're voting for and how the different issues are spread across the three tiers of government. And I find that people are often really not sure about that. That's off-putting when you don't really know what you're voting for. And more so, they're kind of embarrassed to say that they don't really know what they're voting for. Nobody wants to be that person that says, I don't know how it works, because you think you're the only one. So I think that can be a really demotivating factor. And in local council elections, the question for me is, when people go to vote, do they feel like they really have faith that they can change things in their local community as a result of these elections? And I think that they possibly don't, and I think they're probably right to feel that way, because structurally it's quite difficult to do it. So I'm kind of pessimistic, but it is important to exercise the fact that you have a democratic right and go out and do it, even if you spoil a ballot. Always worth doing it.
Yeah, I think you're right that people don't necessarily know what they're voting for. Not everyone, sorry, that was a weird generalisation. But there's a degree of less understanding of maybe what powers the council has. I think people have a stronger grasp of whether power is devolved to the whole of the Parliament or whether it's still at Westminster to a degree.
Even that's become confused post-Indy Red.
Right, and with more powers being devolved.
Yeah.
But people probably have a stronger grasp of that than what the local council actually does. And kind of in this country, we've got a real problem with our councils, I'd argue. When you look at other countries around Europe, the amount of kind of population that each council looks after, ours is wildly over the top compared to other countries which have much smaller council areas and therefore arguably a stronger way of dealing with local issues, as well as bringing things up with the right councillors. One of the ways to kind of combat that is arguably to bring in more councillors, but I think a lot of people balk at that idea because historically, again, people look at councillors and don't necessarily see what they do
I was reading
or don't trust them.
A report today that said the Our Democracy campaign, I think, found that from surveys that they had done that actually quite a lot of people said they wanted more councillors. So I'm not totally sure actually.
Is that maybe a political bubble again, or?
Well, if it's a survey, then I don't know. It depends how it was conducted. But it seemed that it was Robin McAlpine's column. I've just edited. It's usually the last thing that I edit before I come up here and do that on a Thursday, and it's always a good column. It's always worth a read. And part of that is today's column is saying that when you look at other local democracies throughout other places in Europe, there's a much smaller ratio of councillor to population, if you like. Then you come to Scotland and there's one councillor for 1,200 people, and some other places it's one councillor for a couple of hundred people. So it's definitely, when you look at some of the structural differences, it's quite stark. But as he says in the column as well, there's very little political will to change it. So it definitely feels kind of stale. And the risk sometimes is when you're saying to people, go out and vote, go out and vote. You can't make a change, you can't make anything different if you don't vote. But if you're voting in a system where it's very difficult actually for that system to create a change, then people start to get disillusioned in the long run with voting when they're going out over and over again to vote for something and nothing ever changes. So I think, we go and vote, but let's keep having these bigger conversations about, democracy is important. And I think, given the big questions that we've got going on, the Trump era as well, the Brexit era, we need to be thinking about whether our democracies are actually working, and is it time for some really kind of radical changes in that?
And I'd argue it definitely is. I mean, I don't think it's unintentional that there is almost a concerted effort to keep power in the same hands. And if people become disillusioned with politics and step out from it and then don't want to engage with the process and don't want to elect other people in, then power stays in those same hands, and it's in their interest to maintain that over time. And definitely, I think people have become disillusioned with certain branches of government because of that. Because, I mean, even looking like more specifically at Glasgow, Glasgow's had a Labour council for however long, but it's never really seen any of the supposed like benefits of what Labour always talked about, not until it kind of swung around to election time, that some of the promises would roll out again. I think people are really kind of ready for things to change, maybe not as radically as I would personally like, but I mean, if you think about it, the council elections are part 3 of the big change.
Yeah.
You know, like 2014 we had the independence referendum, and then after that everyone was focused in on, okay, how do we radically shift things around in Scotland a little bit? Well, first of all, it was Westminster. That happened, and we kicked out a bunch of people who'd been hanging on in there for ages. Then we got to Holyrood, that happened, and we maintained a pro-independence majority, and it was always like 2017 council elections. That's the last one. At the end of that period of like those 3 elections in a row, Scotland will be arguably a very different place in terms of who is sitting in different levels of government.
It's the 3rd instalment of the fall of Labour, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Council elections, that's what we're likely to see. That will be probably, I would imagine, we've been expecting that will be the big story. Probably the next big story will be an increase in the Tory vote. Arguably, the next big story should probably be the SNP sweeping the board, if that's what happens in a lot of places. Happens, yeah. But I suspect that if the Tory vote increases, that we'll be waking up to some headlines about that. So it's going to be interesting to see the results, because it might give us a little bit of a taster of how things might be heading in terms of the general election. But yeah, I will be curious in terms of turnout. I think that's really key. Loads of arguments going on in Scotland right now about how sick people are or are not of voting, elections, referendum.
Yeah, the voter fatigue.
Yeah, lots of people staking different claims on that. Next, a couple of elections in the space of 6 weeks or so, I think, we might start to get a bit more of a handle on who's more accurate on that. But it's we're going to be waking up to change tomorrow, I would expect.
Yeah, and if this election, the local elections, we do see the continuation of the end of Labour in Scotland, if there's like a wipeout of them from the councils and they lose some of the big ones they've held on to, like Glasgow City Council, which is a very real possibility. And then if we get round to the next surprise general election, which actually adds part 4 into the downfall of Labour, arguably, and if we see that again in Scotland, not really bringing many seats back and not really managing to build that support back up again as they are talking about, are they going to change the tack that they've been just rolling on for the last couple of years in the face of just losing more and more support?
Well, there I think it becomes a leadership question, doesn't it? Is Kezia Dugdale going to stay on after the local council elections for Labour? Because
if it's a disaster for them.
Yeah, because Kezia Dugdale, I think, has been quite clear when it comes to constitutional issues, and let's be honest, that is what's dominating right now. She's quite clear that Labour is unionist, no question. It's occasionally looked like there might be a little bit of wriggle room on that, and then Kezia seems to have moved further towards unionism again. She's been very, very clear on that, and this idea of federalism, but again, the substance never seems to appear behind that. If this is a 3rd rejection by the voters, and a massive one, and they're likely to possibly face another general election humiliation just a couple of years after the last one, unexpectedly, then if I was Kezia Dugdale, I possibly would be wondering what more I can do in that situation. That strategy, the strategy that she has, doesn't seem to be fit for the political times that we're in. The voters are not responding to it. You might think that you're right. You might really believe in the politics that you're promoting. But if no one is voting for it, if no one is responding to it, then what value really are you bringing in terms of an opposition? But the same question will be facing Jeremy Corbyn if Labour is more or less annihilated in the rest of the UK. And of course, Kezia Dugdale and Jeremy Corbyn are quite different, really, when it comes to where they sit on the spectrum of Labour politics.
Oh yeah, very different. I mean, I think even
Labour
their approach to Trident is wildly
party.
different. Yeah,
A very confused party. It cannot get a handle on whether it's Scottish independence or Brexit. It cannot get a handle on the big issues of the day. The Tories have done it successfully. The Tories in Scotland have swept up the unionist vote. The Tories in England are destroying the UKIP vote. They're kind of hoovering it back in for itself and taking Labour votes. They are doing it successfully, you have to say, and the SNP are still pretty strong in Scotland, obviously. So Labour is, we've talked about this before. Where is rock bottom? I mean,
there's also so many things you can say that, Labour have reached as far as it can go down, and then next week it's just like, oh, well, there it is again.
You think that the local elections in Scotland were going to be the last thing for a while. Then we get a snap general election, and it looks like Jeremy Corbyn could take an absolute electoral kicking. So it's just one thing after another. It might go the other way. We could see a late surge for Corbyn.
I think it's going to be Corbyn.
I'm
making this call.
Right,
I'm going to put this live out there right now. I think it's going to be Prime Minister Corbyn.
Wow.
I think it's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, let's bring in a quick comment.
If it actually is, then you're going to get a lot of work out of this as the man that predicted
that's me.
Jeremy Corbyn.
I mean, I also predicted Trump, so, I'm going to take that as my, I've got this. But to bring in a comment quickly, so the Common Green is saying that they are hearing the
that's
voter
our very own Craig Dale,
Craig Dale, it is, yes. But he's saying that he's hearing a lot of people talking about voter fatigue, particularly being mentioned at the polling stations. However, most who mention it are still determined to vote. And he's saying that it will be interesting to see the actual turnout figures once they're out. So maybe voter fatigue, even if it's there, isn't necessarily stopping people from getting out and actually making their mark. And then Stephen J. Miller talking about they were disappointed that there was only 5 candidates for 4 posts in their ward. Actually, which in a way, that's a little bit frustrating because it does feel like we should have more people standing for council elections as well. And again, coming back to Europe, they've got an incredibly positive number for the sort of however many in head of population is standing or has stood for a local position, local government position, whereas we just don't necessarily have that. Which in a way also brings it on to the next point I wanted to make, which is that if you haven't voted today, remember to go out and vote till you boke. You want to be labelling, or rather numbering, every candidate, because it means that you can push the badges right down to the bottom. And if you want to find out more about that on the National, there is a video which I did, which explains exactly how it works, and much to my surprise has gotten over 200,000 views, which stunned me. I did not think it would be
in the local
popular.
elections is sexy. That's why.
It is. Democracy is sexy.
Democracy.
So get out and vote, but vote smart. Vote till you vote.
Yeah, and if you don't, Stephen and I will come looking for you. That's what we're doing after the show.
Yeah,
we're just going to start making our way around
start
Glasgow,
walking around,
tapping the doors,
asking if people voted, sharing out if they didn't.
Yeah.
Actually, should we ask voter preference first, though? Who are you going to vote for? Is it Tories? No, that's fine, pal. Just close the door, move on to the next house.
Put on a free bar for the Tory voters.
Yeah. Or just remind them, you have to go in and make an X in the box, pal. That's what to do. You know what, I just did wonder about...
Certainly not. We encourage you to vote for the people who you think are best suited to serve you and your community.
Disclaimer. Part of me has wondered, though, what percentage of the vote is always lost to people just going into the council elections and just putting an X in the box rather than the numbers.
I've wondered that, because
2007 was a mess when it first came in. A lot of people accidentally spoiled their ballots.
I was standing in today doing it, and I'm like, right, 1, 2... And I thought, oh, wait a minute, what happens if I accidentally vote start doing the preference and then realise I forgot to include someone further up the list and I've already done the rest of the list with it, and I'm looking for a rubber in the polling station.
I think you just score it
and
out.
I'm like, I'm not sure. And then I thought, God, I'd hate to have to go back to the people at the table and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Can I get another bit of paper, please? I mean, it's actually not the simplest way of it, even though it isn't exactly difficult. It's not the simplest way of doing something. And if you think of maybe elderly people who are used to voting with an X in a box and they're suddenly going to do all this, and then the voting system, vote till you boke thing, it's not obvious that you would put in a preferential order a party that you don't like, that you would include them on your list.
Yeah.
You're far more likely instinctively to just not give a place to the parties that you don't like. But actually that's more detrimental to the thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah, because basically by kind of go through the preferential system means that you can vote for who you want, obviously, but then if you do not get who you want, and your vote continues to transfer, because that's it, it's one vote, it just moves depending on your preferences. If you lose your top preferences, it means that you can get somebody that you're more okay with. So say like there was a choice between, you know, a Lib Dem and a Tory, and you lose all your first preferences, you'd probably rather have the Lib Dem than the Tory, assuming that you're on the same kind of political page as we are, viewers at home. You know, and so you've kind of got the option there of like, okay, well, you know what, I didn't want either of them, but I'd rather have the Lib Dem. And that's basically what the preference system does for you. It doesn't give a vote to the Tories. It doesn't give a vote to anybody below the vote that your ballot paper essentially stops moving at, which means that you're never letting anybody in beyond that point.
It's very odd because there is bound to be 2 or 3 parties on that list that there'll be some parties that you're a little bit less fussed over. You know, it's not really who you would vote for, but you know they're not the worst thing in the world, that kind of thing. And then you've maybe got a few parties on there that would really jar against your own political leanings, and you've got to make it. Not only have you got to vote for them technically, but you've got to list them in a preference. So you've then got to decide between the parties that you're not keen on at all, which one, if it really came to it, you would rather have. It's really, really odd. You know, you're standing there having a kind of moral argument with yourself. Very strange. A very odd voting system.
Yeah, so it's not a vote for them, it's a vote to keep somebody else ahead of them.
But it just instinctively doesn't feel
it's sort of
that way.
It does feel like you are giving them points.
Exactly.
As if you're saying, oh, well, yeah, I guess it's okay. So
unless you really understand how that voting system works, I think most people probably don't rank all of the candidates.
A lot of people will
probably just vote for the people that they like and then stop.
But if you are tuning in and you don't understand how that works, there is a video on the Facebook page.
With over 200,000 views.
Over 200,000 views, don't you know? It's very popular, very surprisingly popular. So obviously we're going to start getting the results in tomorrow. That's when we'll start to kind of get an idea of who's been elected in each ward and then each council, but the actual breakdown of the councils themselves, like the coalitions or who's kind of coming in on top, that's going to take a bit longer.
Yeah.
Like that'll take a wee bit of time to work out. But obviously, I imagine Common Space will be doing this as well. The National will be reporting on the results as they come in tomorrow, so do keep a wee eye on our pages throughout the day if you want to keep up to date on where those votes are going. I mean, I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with Glasgow.
Yeah, I think that's probably of all of the councils, a lot of eyes are on Glasgow, just because it will be such a
it's the Labour
historic change. Yeah.
It's the big one. If we're talking about the downfall of Labour, Glasgow City Council going, that's the. I'm not going to say final nail in the coffin because I've said it like 70 times before, but that's like a pretty significant
It's an amazing
moment.
thing if you think like 10 years ago, you know, I know we say things like this all the time, but if you did imagine fast forward 10 years, you would have a yes voting city that had overwhelmingly rejected Labour at every tier of government. You know, you wouldn't have believed it. It's incredible. It really is an incredible fall. So, but again, you know, it's losing the shock factor a bit. You know, we had the general, we've had Holyrood, local council elections, we all kind of know what's coming. So I think it is kind of losing that shock factor. And now the story, if you like, is starting to move on to the great Tory resurgence as we keep hearing about. I'm very interested to get to the general election to see what the numbers are like.
What I find interesting as well about the great Tory resurgence is that it's not. I don't know if we need to go any further than that.
We don't know yet. We don't know. I mean, I think it's not been yet, but there certainly seems to be indications that the unionist vote is kind of consolidating under the Tories now. So, and because there's going to be a ScotRef on the horizon, you might find a much more mobilised unionist vote. So that certainly could see a rise in the numbers for the Tories. But the local election to an extent, but the general's going to give us a much more real indication of where we stand.
But there's a bigger perception of a Tory resurgence than there actually is one. Even looking back at the last couple of elections, I think
that's certainly
you know,
true,
like even comparing like the Tories' popularity at the last election compared to like Thatcher when you know she was at not a great period of time, it's still lower. Like
I think in the last general election, the Tories in Scotland got their lowest share of the vote for something like 70 or 80 years.
Right,
or something.
and yet it's held up as like this, you know, big change around.
It was amazing how that was spun. Very, very good PR operation, but it wasn't reflected in reality. But that said, however, I think we are going to see an increase in the Tory vote, but we are still going to see an overwhelmingly strong, it would seem, SNP vote, we still have a vote from the Holyrood Parliament that stands regardless of the outcome of the general election. And that's the vote to seek the Section 30 order to hold a second Scottish independence referendum. That was all done on the basis of our domestic politics. It was done through the SNP manifesto post-Brexit. It went through the Parliament. It took two parties to form the majority, the Greens and the SNP, to give permission for that. The outcome of the general election does not change that, and Nicola Sturgeon will continue to seek that. But that's where the fight is going to be. I think the Tories are desperate for that increase in vote share to say that it gives them a mandate to oppose permission for a second independence referendum. And as I keep saying, I think we're on very, very dodgy ground with that talk. You're denying democracy if you do that. And that's where Theresa May's saying things about extremism. You want to start paying attention to that kind of language.
Yeah, it's definitely intended to almost make it seem... Like, I think the whole purpose of that style of language isn't just to kind of discredit, but also to make it seem as if the independence movement is a fringe element as opposed to 45% of the country, or something that is still in people's windows, is still an ongoing discussion. When she talks about it as if it's like there's no distinction between separatists and extremists, it's as if we're all, hiding away in dark corners of pubs, whispering about independence, as opposed to having occasional marches on the street where several thousand people come along. It's definitely... It's
incredibly aggressive, but, with a few of us have said, they did the love bombing, the unionist campaign in Indy Ref 1. Indy Ref 2 was never going to be a love bombing campaign. It was always going to switch to hostility, because I think you can only exhaust that "we love you, please don't go" thing.
Well, we love you, we promise we'll give you this and this and this.
Yeah, and then you don't do it, and then after that it's
yeah.
a hard line. It's a much tougher line. So I think this is probably going to be what we're in for. But that language frightens me, because I think that when you start to talk about people as if they're extremists or separatists or whatever, it's because the government wants to use that kind of that tone to eventually get to a stage where they're able to clamp down actually much more materially on people and on activities. And then we really are going into territory where we're talking about things that none of us want to be talking about. But that's what happens if you go down the road of denying democracy. That's why that Section 30 order is so important. The Tory government must honour that. Absolutely must honour it. It cannot go away. It can't be resolved by denying it.
Not only denying democracy, but also the kind of process of dehumanising your opponents.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely what that is.
Yeah.
It's the same way, even during the referendum itself, as much as it's maybe being a little bit more aggressively used now, but the distinction between people who call themselves yes supporters or independence supporters, and then separatists. Because yes and independence were always positive connotations, so when it came to the no side, they had to try and take away and put a new brand onto it, which is something which many people view as divisive, again, another thing they throw around, and less pleasant, so separatism rather than independence. Yeah. It's definitely just a big word game.
Don't be sucked into it, and don't do it on the other side as well. If you're a yes supporter, you're an independent supporter, don't refer to unionists as unions. Don't dehumanise other people either. Let's all remember that we're having a democratic conversation here. It's not about polarisation. It's not about sides in that sense. We can disagree, and we all still carry on living our lives, as we all have. It's totally overplayed, this idea of division. We all know that. Yeah. Scotland is not a divided society that is barely functioning. It's nothing like that. So let's not give into this kind of language. Let's be better than that.
But let's move on to something a little bit more amusing, but still related to the general election. Did you hear about the UKIP launch?
I only heard a little bit about this actually during the week, the last couple of days. Something like cameras weren't allowed in because they hadn't paid the bill for the room. Yeah, that's it. So for the big UKIP launch for the general election, nobody could get into the room at the beginning because UKIP hadn't actually paid the bill for it. I think they did eventually, but man, what a great start. And the other thing that is amusing me immensely about the general election at the moment is all these really sketchy graphs kicking around. Of what?
Of like the, it'll be like, the last time there was 30% of the vote to here, and that was the SNP, and the Tories got 25% of the vote, it comes up to here. It's like, only we can stop them because the Lib Dems only got like 15% of the vote, and it's this wee tiny bit down at the bottom. It's gotten so amazingly like bad and just like not
do you think
representative.
we've just had so many elections that were out of ideas?
Well, not even out of ideas, but just
know?
stopped caring or trying to, like, campaign in a way that makes sense. But it's gotten to the point where I think BuzzFeed are now collecting them all, and there's one guy going around who's fixing them so they're actually proportional, which I got a lot of love for. But it's just like I'm tired of misleading graphics. Already, and the general election is going to have so much misinformation flying around, like before we've even started, with like again Theresa May's weird statements and everything else, that we're just going to keep making fun of this. I think, which has been working really nicely so far. Mm-hmm. It's
you got to have a laugh.
Yeah, but I mean, it's misrepresenting the realities of the makeup of like political areas as well, like of how much support is in an area. It's just always a bit trying to turn it into this like battle between it's us or them, and you got to pick which one. And can I narrow it into that way so people feel compelled to vote, which in a way with the first past the post system in Westminster isn't entirely wrong. Yeah, and I think that there's probably an interesting discussion there as well about how in Scotland with the whole Parliament we have opened up. And we've brought in other parties. Like historically, we've had the Socialists. There's now the Greens are the fourth largest party in the whole Parliament. If your party does something that you don't like, there's another one kind of close by that you still have the option to vote for and will get into power. Whereas I think it's like that stranger sort of disconnect with England right now, with the kind of Corbyn and May side of things, where people who have been like Labour voters their entire life, I guess I'll vote Conservative now. I don't see how that could possibly match up with your values if you've been voting Labour your entire life. Yeah. But when you've only got an option between Labour or the Conservatives, and you think Jeremy Corbyn is like a communist, and you're really against that, people are going to switch sides there.
I also think we kind of misunderstand how people create their politics a lot of the time. People who are very politically engaged will often have a set of politics that they think are consistent, that match up, that follow a line of thinking, that are forward thinking, that take into account various things. A lot of other people don't think like that at all. They think in terms of single issues and things that are important to them, things that matter to their very specific family circumstances or individual circumstances. They're not necessarily thinking about, are my politics consistent? That's why I think it's a lot easier than we think sometimes for people to jump between parties, because it's really, for a lot of people, it is just about what's in the moment and who you believe can deliver something. The problem I think with Corbyn, I've seen interviews with maybe like former Labour voters or working class voters who actually like him, but they don't feel that they can vote for him, and I think they don't think that he can actually sort of see it through. They don't think he's kind of strong enough. I think we sometimes underestimate how much people feel like they need a leader, they need a strong and stable voice. But whether we think these things should be important or not, some of these things are important to voters, and we do sometimes go, I don't understand how you can go from this to that, or how you can vote for someone with these qualities. Let's try and understand.
But speaking of strong and stable leadership, did you see that YouGov did a poll, and apparently only 15% of the population of the UK has actually heard the phrase strong and stable leadership yet?
I can believe it, yeah.
And considering that how sick of it the rest of us all are, and how it's becoming almost like a parody, I think that's only the people who are already well engaged into politics.
Exactly, but we're in the bubble. We are absolutely in the bubble. We are surrounded by it all the time. We know it off by heart. And you assume that other people know about as much of it as you do. But the truth is, actually, get a political message out like that so that it does seep in. You just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it forever. Repeat it endlessly. So we think it's, being overdone. It's not actually. And then journalists are doing it for
that's one of the most frustrating parts.
Because we're now parodying it. So everybody's doing it. Memes and, all of that kind of stuff is on social media. Basically doing the Tory party's job for them. If you could attach a slogan to Jeremy Corbyn that he's managed to get out during this election campaign, what would it be? You have to think about it.
Yeah, I'm struggling actually.
There's not a phrase. There's not something that wraps up what Jeremy Corbyn is offering to the voters. Something that he's saying, here, I guarantee you this. Theresa May's been far more successful with that.
But the thing is, as much as that that phrase is sticking, she's definitely not showing strong and stable leadership. And that's one of the kind of accusations that are levelled against the kind of EU 27 from Theresa May, which is leaking this story about this Brexit dinner where She apparently was badly briefed, seemed to just think she was just going to get everything handed to her, had completely unrealistic expectations and wanted to keep everything in the dark. I mean, this has kind of been leaked with the intention of kind of undermining, I'd say, the UK in the negotiations, but as a knock-on effect of that, it is challenging this idea of a strong and stable leader, with Theresa May kind of like running around unsure what's going on.
I disagree, actually. I think that it's quite easy for Theresa May and for Downing Street to spin that in a very different way. What we seem to know about these leaks is that it was leaked by the EU, as you say, to undermine Britain, right? All you need to do is say to Leave voters that sentence, and they're going to dismiss it out of hand. How do you even know that those leaks were true? Could have been totally exaggerated. Bits could have been made up just to make us look bad, right? Theresa May can very easily tap into that because people are in a mood where they're not in the mood. That seems to be the thing among Leave voters. And the more she plays into this idea of it's us against the EU because they've got it in for us, because they know how successful we can be. You know, if she does that kind of thing, that actually does play really well with Leave voters. They love that. They think that's strong and stable. They think that's like Theresa May kind of sticking it to the EU. And I think that plays really well with them. And so what looks to Remain voters like insanity, actually to Leave voters, they're probably like, go on, Theresa.
Yeah, I think they are.
There's a big gulf in the ways of thinking at the moment in this country.
But in the same way that, like, with the kind of referendum, sort of like love bombing, that can't work again. I don't think that this is something that is sustainable for Theresa May. Like, there's only so long she can keep playing this game before it all blows up.
Theresa May was a Remainer, and see the things that she said yesterday. It struck me that is exactly the things that the Remain campaign said about Brexit before the vote. The things that she was saying about how opportunities would be lost, how, you know, talking about people's families, etc., etc. This is exactly what Remainers said before the vote. Now, instead of it being the fault of Brexit itself, it's the EU's fault for making it difficult. So we no longer have to take responsibility for the fact that we made a choice and that choice has consequences. No. It's the EU's fault. They're deliberately making it difficult. So that's setting up, already she's got a bad guy. Not my fault. I'm over there, I'm fighting with them, I'm standing here, I'm accusing them of interfering in our elections, I'm standing up for Britain. But the EU, I've got it in for, is in 27 countries are going to buddy together against us for their own interests. That, I think, every day of the week will play well Leave for.
But it seems to show, and I do actually agree that you're right, it's going to play to that audience, it's going to play to the Daily Mail and the Express, who actually both did run it on the front cover of like, oh, I'm going to be a difficult person in this negotiation process, which, again, for most people, that's just like, that's mad. But for that kind of core Leave group...
It's 50-50, you know. 52 to 48% vote. Yeah. I think it's probably about 50-50. There is sort of two halves of the country that really don't kind of get how totally differently the other one's saying. I think Remain voters are looking at that stuff thinking, oh my God, Leave voters are going to wake up. You know, they're going to see this and think, oh my God, what have we voted for? And Leave voters are probably thinking, yeah, the Remainers they're going to be in for a shock. They're finding out that we were right all along. They're going to be jumping over our side. So
this is exactly what I mean, though. There's a time limit here. There's a time limit here. This can only go on for so long before it all blows up.
That's going to be the next interesting bit when inevitably at some point public opinion starts to take a turn in a different direction. I think it will as the negotiations go on. The question is, in which kind of direction is it going to start to move?
Because even by leaking that stuff, as much as like, yeah, maybe it is trying to make the UK seem a little bit more unstable, I'd argue the EU are also trying to protect themselves here as well from exactly that accusation of basically like, oh, well, you're making this difficult for us on purpose. You're sabotaging us so that the UK can't play this whole like victim game the entire way through as if, oh, well, you know, we tried to negotiate, but you all banded together against us. I think leaking this is the start of this process of basically saying like, look, you need to be reasonable here and you are not being that. Mm-hmm. And there is that weird fantasy within the Leave camp that the UK is somehow special, that it can leave these 27 or leave the EU and then just have everything it wanted from the start. And I suspect this is a bit of an offence campaign from the EU to start to just put in the back burner this idea that you're going to get everything you want, but understand that we're trying to be reasonable here. We've came prepared and you were not. Yeah.
It's a mess.
Yeah. It is.
It hasn't changed. That situation has not yet changed.
Yeah.
And we're now almost a year down the line from the vote.
And we'll have to see how that goes. Well, we're into the last 5 minutes, so to kind of wrap up, I wanted to bring up ITV are going to be moving forward with leader debates in the run up to the general election as well.
Great, more debates, nice. 2-hour-long debates where everyone shouts over the other one.
Yeah, but they have said that they will basically be continuing the debates whether or not Theresa May shows up. So whether that will be empty chairing or whether that will be bringing in another representative, which I don't think it will if it's a leadership debate.
It should be empty chairs.
It should be empty chairs.
I see.
Yeah. But it's...
But what is Jeremy Corbyn thinking?
Oh, I don't know. He just threw that opportunity away by saying that he would also not do it if Theresa May didn't. It's going to be given a massive platform to actually talk about what Labour are actually putting forward instead of the narrative that's generally picked up by the press about what they're apparently putting forward.
Yeah.
Such a wasted opportunity if he doesn't do it.
Well, he's already ruled it out, I think, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he might make it come. He might just turn around and be like, oh, fine.
There was some, we were chatting in the office and we were thinking, well, maybe Labour fears that the other parties, being the smaller parties in comparison to the big two, if you like, Labour and the Tories, they might all kind of round on Corbyn and just kind of use him as a bit of a punching bag and kind of lay off each other a little bit. That could tactically play kind of badly if he's the only main leader there. But, you know, if I was Corbyn, I'd be taking that risk, given the way the polls are. I think, you know, what you got to lose, really, at this point.
Especially if UKIP aren't there as well, you know, because they won't be, I don't think.
They won't?
I don't think so.
I thought that they were considered a major party by Ofcom.
I made a mistake there of thinking of the Scottish leaders debate. I don't know about if ITV would have UKIP or not.
They may, but I think that it's based on share of the vote and what Ofcom deems to be a major party as a result of that. So actually it's not about the number of MPs. It's about the share of the vote, and UKIP's share of the vote is higher than the number of MPs it has. Well, actually, it doesn't have any MPs now, does it? Because the only one it had just quit. So it's amazing, actually, that UKIP with no MPs could end up on leaders' debate. But, you know, but it's to do with vote share and representation, more sort of, I think, PR-based than first-past-the-post based. Yeah. Is David Coburn going to be involved in the Scottish...
No.
Debate then, okay.
The Scottish debate is...
lower UKIP vote in Scotland, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's like a percentage of a percentage kind of thing. The only two parties not invited to the Scottish one are UKIP and the Scottish Greens, which is kicking up a bit of a fuss, because in Scotland, obviously the Greens are the fourth largest party, but the way that STV has framed it is we're getting the four main parties together, which is kicking the Greens out and bringing the Liberal Democrats in, which has annoyed a lot of people online, and maybe we'll see them do a turnaround. But it kind of annoys me because I think every time we come round to any form of election period, and it's just like, so you're going to include the Greens? And then the broadcasters are kind of, no, not this time. And it's sort of like, why haven't you caught up with the fact that things have changed in Scotland?
Well, I would like to know what the reasoning is behind it, because there's got to be a reason. Someone has, you know, some people have had a meeting and decided at this meeting that this is going to be the case, and I want to know why that is. And it could be because they're basing it on something like Ofcom's guidance on share of the vote, and therefore who is regarded a large party and who has to be considered in TV debates, because broadcasters are quite strongly regulated when it comes to election stuff in ways that newspapers aren't. So it's worth trying to understand how much of a factor that actually plays in it. But regardless of that, even if it is something to do with that, that then just highlights the fact that Ofcom and the broadcasters still haven't caught up with the way that devolution has changed things in Scotland. You can't have the Greens being such a significant party in domestic politics and then sort of write them out of general election issues. Yes, it's different issues that are at play, devolution, etc., etc. But I think the people in Scotland, the voters, don't really necessarily break it down in their heads that way. They're not seeing it. It doesn't reflect the kind of politics that people now have here. And we've said that, you know, that's been said right throughout the referendum, that, you know, it really highlighted the fact that after we had devolution in Scotland, nothing significant changed in the media. And it should have, massive change in democracy, and there should have been changes to reflect that so that we were all better, as you know, journalism was better able to deal with it. Hasn't been the case. These little things, it just highlights it again. And then what happens? People start to take it personally. They think it's a deliberate ploy to leave out a party for political purposes. It might not be. It might just be that the system doesn't work. So we need an explanation from STV. Yeah. I want to know the reason why it's important.
Yeah, and I think if they hadn't framed it as the four main parties in Scotland as well, I think it would have caused a bit less of a stir, because people could argue that the Greens don't have an MP, therefore blah, blah, blah. But actually, Ian Marshall has made an interesting point in the comment section here, saying that the party that ensured a mandate for another referendum will not be allowed on, and that's a disgrace. And that's an interesting point, because given that how much of our politics right now is framed with the constitutional question, you're going to have a leadership debate, which many are going to view, whether you want it or not, as being a vote on whether or not Scotland has that mandate, reinforced again by returning a pro-independence majority. And you're not going to be including one of the parties, or the other party, that ensured that Scotland could democratically back that up in the first place. It just doesn't make sense.
We're using old structures and old formulas to deal with a totally different new type of politics, and it doesn't work. Yeah. Broadcasters and other media outlets need to really get that and start to change it. Ofcom as well, regulators, they need to start realising that they're failing the public by doing that, actually, I think. It's a real dereliction of duty when things like that aren't able to take into account the very many different kind of branches that spring off of the biggest constitutional questions of the day. So, yeah, it's a shame that the Greens won't be in it. Even Nicola Sturgeon, I think.
It could still happen.
Well, it might. But I think even Nicola Sturgeon tweeted about it, didn't she, saying that she thought that they should be included, or was surprised that they weren't, or something like that.
Yeah,
but
I think so.
She did put something out on Twitter, and that, another political party leader. So, but yeah, it's amazing, really, isn't it? I mean, it was the Greens that made it possible for that Section 30 order vote in the Scottish Parliament, and yet
they might not have a voice
not there for the
on the national platform. But that does bring us to the end of the show on that. So thank you everyone who tuned in and watched and commented down below. As always, it's nice to hear what you have to say. Please do tune in again next week at 3 p.m, where once again we will be having another chat about everything that happens between now and then, and I imagine discussing the council results.
We will be, and if you haven't been out to vote yet, go and do it now.
And go watch the video that will tell you how to
do that first and then
effectively vote. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you all again next week. Bye.